It's crazy how things can fall apart, isn't it? I thought I had a solid life, married for 15 years, a decent job, and a kid I was proud of. But looking back now, I realized the cracks had been forming for a while. They just crept in slowly, quietly, until one day, everything came crashing down. And man, I didn't see it coming. Irene and I were never perfect, but we made it work for years. Then somewhere along the way, everything started to shift. It was subtle at first, little things like how she didn't laugh at my jokes anymore or how she stopped asking about my day. Our conversations became these short, transactional exchanges. Did you pay the bills? We need groceries. Stuff like that. You know when someone checks out emotionally but doesn't bother to tell you? That was Irene. The bedroom was the first to go cold. At first, I chalked it up to stress. We both worked after all. But it went from a few missed nights to full weeks, then months. And I'm not proud of this, but I started counting. 6 months without any intimacy. Can you believe that? A man starts to wonder if it's him, or if she's just bored, or maybe it's something worse. Then came the gym obsession. Out of nowhere, Irene started working out religiously. Every day. New outfits, new shoes, the whole 9 yards. She was always sweaty and glowing when she came back home, and she spent more time in front of the mirror than she ever had before. She even started buying clothes she'd never worn before. Tight dresses, low-cut tops, stuff that didn't look like it was meant for me to enjoy. When I asked about it, she laughed it off, said she was just taking care of herself. Funny, right? After 15 years, she suddenly decides now is the time to care. Things got weirder when Grayson, our 19-year-old son, started inviting his best friend, Caden Hartley, to hang out all the time. Caden was this cocky kid, always full of himself, but I didn't mind him much. I figured it was good for Grayson to have someone close, especially since Caden's own family situation was a mess. He was always crashing at our place. A little too often, maybe, but what was I going to do? I didn't think much of it, at first. But then, Irene started acting different around Caden. I noticed it almost immediately, though I told myself I was overthinking. She wore these skimpy little outfits whenever he was over. Tiny shorts that barely covered anything, tank tops with no bra underneath. I tried not to stare, but it was impossible not to notice. And trust me, Caden noticed too. You can tell when a guy is checking someone out, no matter how smooth he thinks he is. One night, I walked in on them sitting way too close on the couch. Their legs were touching, and they were laughing at something on her phone, heads leaned in together like they were sharing some inside joke. The way Irene smiled at him, it was a smile I hadn't seen from her in months, maybe longer. It was like I wasn't even in the room. I remember standing there, frozen for a moment, watching the two of them as that icy pit started forming in my stomach. I told myself I was imagining things, that it was just friendly, that I was reading too much into it. But the doubt, it was already there, gnawing away at me. And once that seed is planted, there's no unseeing it. The thing is, every time I try to talk to Irene about it, she blew me off. "Don't be ridiculous, Dex," she'd say, rolling her eyes like I was some paranoid idiot. "He's just a kid. He's Grayson's friend. You're making it weird." But it wasn't just in my head. I know what flirting looks like. I know what it means when a woman leans in too close, when she laughs a little too hard at a guy's jokes, when she goes out of her way to make him comfortable. And that's exactly what Irene was doing, going out of her way for Caden. She cooked for him like he was royalty, made sure he had everything he needed when he stayed over, and she even started checking on him in the middle of the night when he crashed in our guest room. I mean, who does that? The worst part? When I confronted her about it, she turned it all on me. "You're being insecure," she snapped. "You always do this. You get jealous for no reason." She made me feel like the crazy one, like I was this needy, insecure idiot who couldn't handle his wife being nice to another guy. I hated that feeling, but the way she twisted things, it worked. Every time I tried to push back, she'd shut me down, make me feel small, and then act like nothing was wrong. She was good at that, real good, but deep down I knew something was off. I started staying later at the office, just so I wouldn't have to be around them. Coming home felt like walking into someone else's life, someone who was slowly being replaced. And the worst part, I still loved her. Even as my gut screamed at me that something was wrong, I clung to the hope that I was wrong, that maybe it really was just in my head. Then one night, I walked in on something I'll never forget. Irene was in the kitchen, making Caden's favorite meal, spaghetti with meatballs. I stood in the doorway, watching her hum to herself, and all I could think was, when was the last time she did this for me? Later that night, I passed by Caden's guest room, and the door was cracked open just a little. I glanced in without meaning to, and there she was, sitting on the edge of the bed, talking to him in a low voice. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but the way she touched his arm, the way she leaned in, it felt intimate. Too intimate. And Caden? He was eating it up like he knew exactly what was happening. I wanted to walk in and demand answers. I wanted to shout, to throw Caden out of the house, and tell Irene exactly what I thought of her. But I didn't. I just stood there in the hallway, watching, feeling that cold, heavy weight settle deeper in my chest. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just in my head. It was real. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the walls close in around me. The house felt foreign, like I didn't belong there anymore. And as I lay there, I couldn't shake the thought, how long has this been going on? I wanted to believe it hadn't crossed any lines yet, that maybe it was just flirting, just attention-seeking. But the way Irene acted, the way Caden responded, it was only a matter of time. And that's when the fear set in. Not just fear of what might happen, but fear of what I'd do when it did. Because if there's one thing I knew, it's that I wasn't going to sit back and let it happen. No way in hell. This was only the beginning. And something told me it was about to get a whole lot worse. I knew things were spiraling out of control, but Irene didn't care. In fact, she seemed to enjoy the way things were unfolding, almost like my frustration gave her some kind of thrill. It's like she wasn't just pulling away, she was pushing me away, daring me to react. And God help me, I did. Every time Caden came over, Irene made sure he felt like a damn king. His favorite meals were ready on the table, and she went all out with the kind of effort I hadn't seen in years. She fussed over him like a mom, checking in on him before bed, asking if he needed anything. But it was more than motherly concern, it felt like something else. And each time she insisted he stay for dinner or offered to do his laundry, I felt my stomach churn. The moment she suggested washing his clothes after one of his sleepovers, I nearly lost it. Why the hell are you doing his laundry, Irene? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could feel my anger bubbling just beneath the surface. He's not a stray dog you picked up. He's Grayson's friend. Let him figure his own shit out. She didn't even look up from folding the dish towel in her hands. You don't need to be such a jerk, Dex. He has enough going on without you being rude. Rude? I repeated, incredulous. You're acting like you're his goddamn mother. She sighed dramatically, the kind of exaggerated exhale that told me she was done with the conversation before it even started. And just like that, I knew where this was going. Every confrontation ended the same way, her dismissing me like I was some paranoid fool. You're overreacting, she said, not even bothering to meet my eyes. He's a kid, Dex. You're making it weird. There was again that same line. He's a kid. Like that meant anything. I wasn't blind, and I wasn't crazy. I knew what was happening, even if she wouldn't admit it. But every time I tried to bring it up, she twisted it all around. It wasn't just frustrating, it was infuriating. The way she acted like I was imagining things made me feel like I was losing my mind. And maybe that's exactly what she wanted. We argued more often now. Every little thing became a fight. I'd asked her why Caden was here so often, and she'd accuse me of being insecure. I'd mention how weird it was that she was cooking his favorite meals all the time, and she'd call me jealous. You're just looking for a problem, she'd say, waving me off like I was some clingy idiot who couldn't handle his wife having friends. Friends? I snapped during one argument. He's 19, Irene. He's our son's friend. Do you think it's normal to act like this around him? She rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. You're impossible, she muttered, turning away from me. It's not like that, Dex. You need to stop reading into things. But I was reading into things because everything about the way she treated Caden was too much, too intimate, too comfortable, too familiar. And the way she defended him, the way she lashed out at me whenever I brought it up, only made it worse. I felt like a stranger in my own home, a third wheel in my own marriage. And there was nothing I could do about it. I started working late, not because I had to, but because I couldn't stand being in the house. I'd sit in the parking lot after work, just staring at the steering wheel, dreading the drive home. Some nights, I even thought about getting a hotel room, just to avoid another fight, another night of feeling like I didn't belong. But I always went home in the end, hoping things would change. They never did. Every time I walked through the front door, it was the same. Irene would be there, smiling at Caden in a way that made my skin crawl. They'd laugh together over some stupid inside joke, and I'd feel like the intruder. Like I was the one who didn't belong. Grayson never seemed to notice anything. At least, not enough to say anything. But how could he not? How could anyone not see what was happening? One night, I came home later than usual. Irene and Caden were sitting at the kitchen table, deep in conversation. She had that look on her face, the one she used to give me when we were first dating, the one that made me feel like I was the only person in the world. Only now, it wasn't for me. "Hey," I said, dropping my keys on the counter a little harder than necessary. They both looked up, but only Caden acknowledged me with a casual nod. Irene just went back to whatever they were talking about, like I didn't even exist. I poured myself a drink and leaned against the counter, watching them. Irene glanced up, finally noticing me. "Long day?" she asked, her tone flat. "No worries. No concern." "You could say that," I muttered, taking a long sip from my glass. Caden excused himself soon after, heading upstairs to the guest room. Irene stayed at the table, scrolling through her phone like nothing was wrong. And maybe for her, nothing was wrong. But for me, everything was falling apart. I couldn't stop the thoughts from racing through my mind. Every look, every touch, every whispered conversation between them. It all felt like evidence of something I couldn't prove. And the worst part? I had no idea how far it had gone. Was it just flirting, or was it more? Had they crossed that line? And if they hadn't yet, how much longer until they did? I tried bringing it up again the next day, but it was like talking to a wall. Irene was ice cold, completely shut off. "You need to let it go, Dex," she said, her voice sharp. "You're making things worse with your jealousy." "Jealousy?" I scoffed. "You're damn right I'm jealous. I'm jealous because my wife is acting like she's in love with some kid half her age." Her expression darkened, and I knew I'd crossed a line. "You really are pathetic," she said, her words dripping with venom. "If you were half the man you used to be, maybe I wouldn't need to look elsewhere for attention." That one stung, and she knew it. From that point on, it was like we were living in two separate worlds under the same roof. She spent her time with Caden, and I spent mine at work or holed up in the spare room, nursing a bottle of whiskey and trying to figure out where everything went wrong. I wanted to confront Caden, to tell him to stay the hell away from my wife. But what good would it do? He was just a kid, and Irene was the real problem. She wasn't just pulling away, she was pushing me away. And no matter what I did, it felt like I was powerless to stop it. The worst part was the waiting. Waiting for the moment when everything would finally blow up. Because deep down, I knew it was coming. The tension was too thick, the lies too obvious. It was only a matter of time before the truth came out. And when it did, I wasn't sure what I'd do. I wasn't supposed to be home that night. I had planned to stay late at the office. Some budget reports needed reviewing, and honestly, I didn't mind the excuse to avoid the tension at home. But around 8 p.m., I decided, screw it. The work could wait. I was tired of pretending I had somewhere else to be. All I wanted was to go home, maybe pour myself a drink, and hope Irene wouldn't pick another fight. But the second I pulled into the driveway, something felt off. The house was dark, too dark. Usually, the TV would be on, or I'd hear Grayson talking in his room, or Irene banging around in the kitchen. But tonight, there was nothing, just silence. The kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. I stepped inside, and it hit me like a punch to the gut. Something wasn't right. My gut was screaming at me, telling me to leave, but I couldn't. It was like I had been waiting for this moment without realizing it. Like some part of me knew that whatever was happening behind those walls was the answer I'd been searching for, the answer I didn't want to know but couldn't avoid anymore. I set my briefcase down as quietly as I could, my heart hammering in my chest. I scanned the living room. No Caden on the couch. No sign of Irene in the kitchen. Just darkness and silence, thick and suffocating. I could feel the sweat building at the back of my neck as I made my way up the stairs, the sound of each step echoing in my ears. And that's when I heard it. hushed laughter, low and intimate, coming from down the hall. My stomach dropped. I knew that laugh. It was Irene's, soft and playful in a way I hadn't heard in years. Not since us. I wanted to convince myself that it was nothing, just another of those moments I'd blown out of proportion. But deep down, I knew better. The bedroom door was cracked open, just enough for me to see a sliver of what was inside. I stopped outside the door, frozen, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. Slowly, I pushed it open just an inch more, just enough to see. And there it was. Caden was sprawled across my bed, our bed, in nothing but a pair of shorts. His hair was a sweaty mess, sticking to his forehead, and the way he lay there, all relaxed and smug, made my blood run cold. But it was Irene who stopped me in my tracks. She stood next to him, fixing her hair in that lazy, post-sex way, her blouse wrinkled and half-tucked into her jeans. Her cheeks were flushed, and she looked satisfied. They didn't notice me at first. For a few long, agonizing seconds, I just stood there staring at the two of them, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My brain couldn't keep up, couldn't process the reality of it fast enough. I wanted to wake up, to shake myself out of this nightmare. But this wasn't a dream. It was real. It was happening. Then Caden looked up and saw me. His eyes went wide, panic setting in immediately. "This isn't what it looks like," he stammered, sitting up too fast and fumbling with the blanket, like covering himself would somehow make it better. Irene froze, her hand still halfway through smoothing down her hair. Her expression shifted from surprise to something else, something colder. Like she had been caught, but she wasn't sorry. Not really. I stood there, gripping the doorframe so hard I thought my knuckles might split. I could feel the rage bubbling up inside me, hot and unforgiving. But more than the anger, there was this crushing weight pressing down on my chest, this suffocating sense of betrayal that made it hard to breathe. I didn't need an explanation. I didn't need to ask questions. I knew exactly what I was looking at. And in that moment, everything between us, the love, the years, the promises, shattered into a million pieces. Irene didn't even try to defend herself right away. She just stood there, watching me with that blank, unreadable expression, like she was waiting to see how I'd react. Like this was a game, and I was just another player. Caden, on the other hand, was already scrambling. "It's not. We didn't." "Shut the hell up," I snapped, my voice coming out low and dangerous. He shut up real quick. I turned my attention to Irene, still standing there like she had all the time in the world. "So," I said, my voice dripping with venom, "this is what it's come to?" She didn't answer. She just crossed her arms over her chest, as if daring me to say more. That cold, defiant look in her eyes, God, I'll never forget it. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't ashamed. If anything, she looked bored, like I was the one ruining her night. "You disgust me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. That seemed to hit a nerve. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't say anything. Not yet. Caden looked like he wanted to disappear into the mattress. He was pale, beads of sweat rolling down his forehead as he sat there, frozen under my glare. But I wasn't going to waste my breath on him. He wasn't the one who destroyed my marriage. Irene was. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the room. I couldn't stay there, couldn't stand the sight of them. I made it halfway down the hall before I heard Irene's voice behind me, sharp and full of venom. "Maybe if you weren't such a miserable bastard, this wouldn't have happened." That stopped me dead in my tracks. I turned slowly, my fists clenched at my sides. "What did you just say?" She met my gaze head on, her eyes flashing with defiance. "You heard me," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Maybe if you weren't such a failure of a husband, I wouldn't need to find someone else." It took everything in me not to lose it right there. My vision blurred with rage, but I forced myself to stay calm. Barely. I took a step toward her, my voice low and steady. "You want to blame me for this? Go ahead, but don't think for a second that I'm the one who ruined us. That's on you, Irene. All of it." She rolled her eyes, like my words meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. And that was it. The moment I knew there was no coming back from this. Not for us. Caden, the little coward, finally found his voice. "I should probably go," he muttered, grabbing his clothes and scrambling out of the room like a rat fleeing a sinking ship. "Yeah," I said, glaring after him. "You do that." As he bolted down the stairs and out the front door, the silence in the house grew thick and suffocating. Irene and I stood there, staring at each other across the wreckage of what used to be our life. The moment Caden bolted out of the house like a thief caught red-handed, I stood in the hallway, fists clenched, trying to steady my breathing. Irene was already halfway down the stairs, heading for the kitchen like she could just make this whole mess disappear. I followed close behind, my blood boiling, fists clenched so tight I could feel my nails digging into my palms. I found her leaning against the counter, hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the sink. Her cool demeanor from earlier had cracked, and I could see the panic in her eyes. She turned to face me, her mouth already moving before I even had the chance to speak. "It was a mistake, Dexter," she blurted out, her voice shaky, as if she could still salvage the situation with some half-assed excuse. "I didn't mean for it to happen. He came onto me." I stared at her, stunned by the audacity. "You expect me to believe that?" I said, my voice low, dangerously calm. "Do you think I'm that stupid, Irene?" She crossed her arms defensively, her bottom lip trembling. "It's not like I planned it. It got out of hand." The laugh that escaped me wasn't even intentional. It was bitter, sharp, and filled with disbelief. "Got out of hand?" I repeated. "You mean you let it happen? Hell, you wanted it to happen." Her eyes widened, and I could see the switch flip inside her. Cornered, defensive, she dropped the remorse act and shifted into attack mode. That's what she always did when she was backed into a corner. She came out swinging. "Oh, don't act so high and mighty," she spat. "Maybe if you had paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have been in that situation in the first place." And there it was, the blame. She didn't just stab me in the back. She twisted the knife, making it clear this was somehow my fault. "You've got some nerve," I growled, my anger bubbling up faster than I could control. "You cheat on me, in our bed, with a kid, and now it's my fault? You got to be kidding." Her eyes blazed with fury. "What did you expect, Dexter? You checked out of this marriage years ago. You stopped caring. I've been miserable for so damn long, and you didn't even notice." The way she said it, like it was fact, like I had driven her to this, ignited something in me. I stepped closer, my voice rising, unable to hold back any longer. "You think that justifies screwing our son's best friend? That's your excuse? You're pathetic, Irene." Her face twisted in rage. "At least someone wanted me," she screamed, her voice cutting through the air like a whip. That one hit hard, harder than I expected. But I wasn't going to let her see how much it hurt. Not now. Our shouting echoed through the house, the sound bouncing off the walls and rattling the windows. I knew the neighbors could hear. I knew Grayson would hear about it sooner or later. But none of that mattered. In that moment, it was just us, two people tearing each other apart, all the bitterness and resentment spilling out like poison. Irene threw open the kitchen window, letting the cool night air sweep in. It was like she wanted the whole world to hear what a mess we were. And honestly, I didn't care anymore. "Let them hear. Let them know. You think I'm the problem?" I shouted. "You're the one who turned this marriage into a joke." She whirled around, her eyes filled with fury. "I'm done pretending, Dexter," she screamed, loud enough to wake the entire neighborhood. "I've been miserable for years, and I'm sick of living a lie." Before I could respond, she stormed past me, heading for the front door. I followed close behind, fueled by rage and disbelief. "Where the hell do you think you're going?" I demanded, grabbing the door frame as she threw the door open. "Out!" she snapped, stepping onto the porch without a second thought. "And I don't care who hears." The cool night air hit me like a slap in the face, but the adrenaline coursing through my veins kept me moving. I stepped outside after her, slamming the door behind me. The neighbors were already gathering, drawn to the noise like moths to a flame. Porch lights flicked on one by one, faces peeking out from behind curtains, bodies leaning over railings to get a better look at the chaos unfolding in the street. "Irene, get back inside," I hissed, my voice low but filled with fury. But she wasn't having it. Not tonight. She stood at the top of the porch steps, her arms spread wide, defiance burning in her eyes. "I'm done, Dexter," she shouted, her voice carrying through the quiet street. "I'm done pretending. I've been miserable for years." The words hung in the air like a slap, leaving me breathless. I could feel the weight of the neighbors' stares, could hear the whispers spreading like wildfire. But none of it mattered. All that mattered was the woman standing in front of me, tearing my world apart piece by piece. "You're pathetic," I muttered, my voice cracking under the weight of my anger. She laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that sent a chill down my spine. "No, Dexter," she said, stepping down onto the lawn. "What's pathetic is this marriage. What's pathetic is you." I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. All I could do was stand there, fists clenched, as Irene continued to tear into me, her voice rising with every insult. "You're a failure," she spat. "A failure as a husband, a failure as a man. And you know it, don't you? That's why you're so angry. Because you know I'm right." The neighbors watched in stunned silence, their eyes wide with disbelief. I could feel their pity, their judgment, their curiosity, all of it pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't escape. But in that moment, I didn't care. I was too far gone, too consumed by rage and heartbreak to care about anything other than the woman standing in front of me, the woman who had betrayed me in the worst way possible. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Irene's smile was cold, empty. "Yeah," she said, "it is." And with that, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving me standing alone on the porch, surrounded by the wreckage of everything we had built together. The neighbors murmured among themselves, their whispers filling the night like a chorus of ghosts. But I didn't hear them. All I could hear was Irene's voice, echoing in my mind, over and over again. "I've been miserable for years." And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. After that night, I knew there was no salvaging our marriage. It was over, plain and simple. But I wasn't about to let Irene walk away without feeling some of the pain she had inflicted on me. If she thought she could find excitement by screwing around with some kid, then fine. But I wasn't going to sit there licking my wounds. No, if Irene wanted to play dirty, I'd beat her at her own game. And that's when I thought of her, Vienna Hartley, Caden's mother. Vienna had always been available, lonely even. She was the kind of woman you could tell just needed someone to notice her. And I figured if Irene was going to destroy everything we built by fooling around with Caden, the least I could do was return the favor. And not just with anyone, oh no. I was going to get close to the one person whose involvement would hurt the most. I started slow, testing the waters. A friendly message here and there, nothing too obvious. Just wanted to check in about Grayson and Caden, I'd write. Or, "How's everything going with you?" She responded fast, faster than I expected. And soon, we were meeting for coffee. She seemed eager for company, happy to have someone to talk to. And before long, those casual conversations over coffee turned into something more. At first, it felt like just another way to distract myself from the mess at home. But the more time I spent with Vienna, the more I realized how easy it was to slide into this new role. She liked the attention, and I liked the control. It felt good, damn good, to have something that was just mine. Something that Irene couldn't touch or ruin. The first time Vienna and I slept together, it was like flipping a switch. I didn't feel guilty, not for a second. Why should I? Irene had thrown away everything we had when she opened our bed to Caden. This wasn't just revenge, it was reclaiming something for myself. Taking back what little power I had left. And it was working. We kept things discreet, or at least as discreet as we could. Long evenings at her place, secret texts during the day. Vienna was surprisingly open to the whole thing, maybe even more into it than I was. It was clear she had been starved for affection, and I gave her exactly what she needed. But for me, this was never about love or romance. This was about sending a message. And after a few weeks, I decided it was time to strike. One evening, Irene cornered me in the living room, as if she thought there was still some part of our marriage worth saving. She wore that fake, pitiful expression, like she was the victim in all this. "Dex, can we just talk?" she asked, trying to sound sincere, though we both knew she wasn't. I took a sip from my whiskey, giving her the kind of smile that wasn't really a smile at all. "Sure," I said casually. By the way, I've been sleeping with Caden's mom. Her face went pale. She stared at me, blinking as if she hadn't heard me right. You what? She whispered, her voice barely audible. I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment. Yeah, we've been seeing each other for a while now. I smiled, really smiled this time, enjoying the stunned silence. So, I guess we're both having some fun, aren't we? For a moment, she looked like she might pass out. Her mouth opened and closed as she tried to find the right words, but there was nothing she could say. Nothing that would fix the mess she had made, or stop the fallout that was about to hit her like a freight train. The next day, the news spread like wildfire. It was almost impressive how fast word got around. Neighbors, co-workers, even people who barely knew us. Everyone was talking about it. And the gossip wasn't just about my affair with Vienna. No, people were far more interested in Irene's betrayal with Caden. Did you hear? She slept with her son's best friend. No wonder Dexter's with Caden's mom now. It's a mess, an absolute mess. The whispers followed her everywhere. Every time she stepped outside, she was met with judgmental stares and hushed conversations. Friends who used to invite her to brunch stopped calling. Even the people who used to idolize her turned their backs. Irene's reputation was in tatters, and there wasn't a damn thing she could do about it. But the fallout didn't stop with Irene. Caden, humiliated and furious, stopped speaking to his mother altogether. He moved out, crashing with friends, and Vienna was left alone to pick up the pieces. At first, she had enjoyed the thrill of our affair, maybe even believed it could turn into something real. But once Caden found out, it all unraveled. And just like Irene, Vienna quickly became the subject of every whisper and sideways glance in the neighborhood. Our marriage, if you could still call it that, officially ended in a storm of bitterness. The divorce was ugly, messy, and full of spite, just like everything else between us. Irene fought me for everything, every last piece of furniture, every penny in the bank. But I didn't care. She could have the house, the car, all of it. None of it mattered anymore, because I had already won. Sure, my affair with Vienna wasn't going to last. It was never meant to. We both knew that, but it didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was that Irene would never forget what happened. She would carry the weight of her choices with her for the rest of her life. And every time she saw Caden, every time she passed by Vienna's house or overheard the whispers from neighbors, she'd remember exactly how everything fell apart. In the end, there was no happy ending. No redemption. Just the cold, hard truth. We had destroyed each other, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but wreckage. And you know what? I don't regret a damn thing.